Is that good?
Everybody's feeding?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. Go ahead and hit the space bar whenever you're ready.
After a 4-hour deliberation, Judge William Freeman read their decision.
And that it is your recommendation, as a jury, that unanimous recommendation, that the defendant Blanche Taylor Kaiser Moore be sentenced to death. Is that your verdict? So you are. May God have mercy on her soul.
I think that God have mercy on her soul was what hit me more than anything. I was pretty sure that they were going to find her guilty, but I was just really kind of keeping my fingers crossed that they didn't give her the death penalty. But they did.
Blanche Moore was taken to prison in an unmarked car. Her daughters remained in shock by the death penalty sentence.
That was a really bad time. At that point in time, right there, I was still wanting to believe that she had done nothing wrong and trusting in that.
I mean, I do love my mom. And it does hurt me to have to say, I think that this is a real possibility, that there's a side of her maybe I didn't know. That breaks my heart.
It's really a little bit scary to think that you've lived your whole life with somebody that you may not have known. My dad really loved her, but I think he loved her more than she loved him. She just didn't interact with Dad in a very loving way. I remember a time as they passed each other, he just kind of grabbed her and took her as if to, like, you know, hold her like a slow dance and just kind of twirl her around and stuff like that. And she's kind of like, I don't have time for this, and stop. You know, so she wasn't very playful like that, like he was. And maybe that was just something she wasn't comfortable with. I don't know. You know, some people don't like to show public displays of affection. Sunday mornings, we would get up. We would be at church by 9:30. Mom enjoyed being a woman. She was very feminine, and she enjoyed being attractive. She never walked out of that house not tan, without makeup on, all dressed up, ready to go to church. When I went to church, it used to be that you had ushers, that when the women came to the door, they would actually usher them to their seats. When Mom came in, because she always looked so beautiful, they were all like kind of nudging the other out of the way to try to escort her. Oh, here's Blanche, I'll take her. And the other one would be like, no, I'll walk her. She probably could have come across a little flirtatious because she was so personable.
I told you before, you can call me Blanche.
That smile came on and those eyes lit up, and the dress that she had just did show a little bit of cleavage. And that was when the other usher jokingly said to Dad that your wife causes more arguments between husbands and their wives than any woman.
James, you're a lucky man.
And I do remember Dad being really upset about that.
This is the last time.
But the way that they argued
I'm going back to the service.
What?
seemed normal to me, because you also saw two people that took care of their kids and, you know, did vacations and Christmas and all that stuff. So everything felt very, very normal. It started out just with a general feeling of him not feeling very good and him having a really bad sore throat. And she went to the doctor with him, and they had said he had the flu. He had had a heart attack when he was 39. He recovered from that, and I remember the doctor had said there was some damage done to his heart from the heart attack. So, you know, flus or colds really stress his heart.
Your favorite soup. How are we feeling today?
Terrific.
He had been sick for like a week and a half. And it appeared that she was doing everything she could do for him. I mean, like, whatever he wanted to eat, I mean, she got for him.
Go on, sweetie, eat up. You're gonna need your strength.
She was a very good cook, and he was very particular, and he would not eat anyone's food but hers. But his throat was swollen to the point that he couldn't get his medicine down. I just had this overwhelming feeling of doom. And I would cry because I would go to bed and I would be afraid, but I didn't know why I was afraid. I just knew I was afraid, and I just felt like something was so wrong. The alarm clock went off that morning. I knew. I just sat straight up in my bed. And, Mom. And I said, Mama, the alarm clock's going off and Daddy's not cutting it off. And I knew.
It's from Daddy's room.
Okay, I'll go check up on him.
And she got up and she walked in there, and I heard her say, oh no. He was laying there very peacefully. And then the next thing I remembered was them rolling him past me in a black bag. And that was that. James and Taylor, 45 of 1014 Fair Avenue, died this morning unexpectedly at his home. He was the husband of Mrs. Blanche Kaiser Taylor, who survives. In addition to his wife, he is survived by his daughters. That's my dad.
When I see that, I just see somebody that was happy. I try to live my life in a way that my dad could be proud of me. Daddy just really instilled a lot of family values that at the end of the day, that was one of the most important things that you have. He was a good dad. After she was clearing clothes out, I didn't return home for weeks. I just had this fear of coming home. I truly don't know what it was. I just knew I was afraid, and I did not want to go back there. But I didn't know what I was afraid of. I just knew I was afraid.
So how's everything at school?
It's fine.
I remember him trying to talk or be nice, and stuff like that. But you're talking about seven weeks, basically, between, Dad dying and then someone else eating with us. And I think that I probably resented that a little bit. Monday nights, Mom was always gone. She would say she was going out.
Oh, you look nice.
Then when I turned 16 and I was able to come and go, it seemed like Mom was gone more. They did start taking vacations together.
You're going out with Raymond, right?
I'm just going out to relax a little.
But they still didn't really talk about it or really admit to it. It was kept very hush-hush. She was always just saying they were friends. And I'm like, no, you're not. You know, you're not just friends. They were like a married couple in many ways. They just didn't live together. It was the same way with Raymond as it was with my dad. No real displays of affection. And sometimes it's hard to know if she was private because she was trying to protect you from something, or if she was embarrassed and ashamed, or some other reason. That's Dwight. When Dwight met Mom, he had been a pastor, and he actually supposedly had an affair with the church secretary at his prior church. He would come up and visit every week. And then it seemed like it was like a couple of times a week, and then every other day. To me, it was really obvious, I think, that he was pursuing her. I think I did ask some questions as to, well, what's up with that? And of course, once again, it was like, well, we're just friends. And I just left it alone. I bumped into Raymond as I was going out the front door.
Hey, Raymond. It's been a while.
Yeah, well, I haven't been feeling all that well.
Sorry to hear that.
He asked me, he said, what do you think this is on my neck?
Do you know what that is?
And I was like, I don't know. That just kind of looks like razor burn to me.
It doesn't seem serious.
And the next thing I knew, they admitted him into the hospital, and he just never came out. I realized Raymond was very sick, but for a long time, it was kind of like I didn't quite know what was going on with him. It was like he was better, then he would regress. He was better, he would regress. She was by his side basically every day. I don't know that she missed a day. Do you need anything? And then I remember her coming down to the house and saying that he passed away, and I was like, after Raymond's death, it was a lot like Daddy's. She seemed to be kind of emotionless.
Hey, Mom. Hi, Cindy. You okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Really, Mom?
I mean, they could have had a really nice life together if they had decided to get married.
I was gonna go out, but I can stay here for a while if you want me to.
It's be silly. Enjoy yourself.
But it's just kind of like she moved on. I mean, she just didn't really talk about it.
What? Oh, go on, honey.
She called us and she said, "Can you please come up here?" She said, "I'm just so sick." And when we got up there, she actually was lying on the floor.
Are you okay?
Oh, God, I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't take it anymore.
I said, "What in the world is wrong with you?" Because she was like so emotional.
These trips, they won't stop.
Mom, it's okay. We're right here.
She just kept saying, "I keep dreaming that I'm going to the ocean and I keep putting my hands in the water, but I just can't wash the blood off of them." And I just thought, Mom's just really been under a lot of stress. There was no reason to suspect anything at that point. And whether that be because I didn't want to or my mind just wouldn't allow me to, there was such long time spans in between. She was married to my dad like 22 years, I think. And then she had, 17 years with Raymond. And she'd said it was a dream. And, and of course, everybody has crazy dreams sometimes. And so I just didn't think anything about it. Now, many years later, I do wonder, was that a sign? Was there something more to that? And I missed it. I just missed it. She was a little bit more open with, spending time with him. He would come over and have like a meal or something. And it was just something about him that bothered me. Dwight appeared to be so affectionate in almost a needy kind of way. He was learning to be all touchy all the time. And it was almost kind of high schoolish.
You have such a pretty boss.
I'm concentrating here, okay?
And so I was thinking, this will never work because Mom is so standoffish with that type of affection and stuff.
Why don't I put a little music on?
Well, it sounds like a lovely idea, Dwight.
Yes. I'll be right back.
Thank you, Dwight. Mom, what is this?
When he finally gave her a ring, which we were told was a friendship ring, I looked at her, I said, "You're seriously not going to marry him, right? You're just seriously not going to do that, right?"
Please, Cindy. It's just a gift.
She would say, "Heck no, I'm not going to marry him," and acted like we were crazy for even acting like she was going to. And up until the day before she married Dwight, she said she wasn't going to marry him. Right after she got married, she called us over and she was like not happy.
What is it, Mom? What's the matter?
Nothing. I'm just in a mood, that's all.
Adjusting to living with a man again wasn't going well.
He never takes me into account at all.
With Raymond, they didn't live together. And being with someone 24/7 is a lot different. She was just sitting on the couch and she was just mad with her arms folded and her legs crossed and kicking her leg. And she just said, I'm just not happy today. I'm just angry today.
It's impossible. Makes me sick.
We'll adjust. Just give it time.
He got sick a few days after that. When Dwight was in the hospital, all these detectives started coming around.
Ma'am,
They just would ask about Mom and her relationship with Dwight and how long, she'd known him and things like that.
Doctor.
And I think at one point, she was not even allowed to go into his room.
What was that? I don't know.
Then I was like, what is going on?
Mom, this is really weird. It'll be fine.
Mom just had this appearance of becoming more and more stressed. And we would ask her, is there something you need to tell us? And is there something we need to know? No, everything's fine. Everything's fine.
I'm sure it's nothing.
And I'm like, they're asking a lot of questions. This is serious. And one of the guys said I would do a heavy metals test on him if he were my patient. And they did.
Because I want to show you this.
And that was how it was discovered. The next thing I knew, Dwight was really, really sick, and they found some arsenic in his system.
Don't worry, okay? I'm sure it's nothing.
There came a point where I was like, I think Mom's in trouble here, and I think Mom's a suspect.
Thank you for coming. Please, have a seat.
My sister and myself were called down to the district attorney's office.
Did your mother ever say anything to you about an argument or being angry with Dwight?
I don't understand what you're asking.
He just talked to us and said that, they just had suspicions that Mom had poisoned Dwight. And I didn't believe anything at that point.
Once they discovered arsenic was in Reverend Moore, they collected a sample of Reverend Moore's urine every day for a week.
What I want to show you is this.
When they sent that off and got it back, it showed that he was getting increasing and decreasing doses of arsenic while he's in the hospital.
So he's getting worse.
He's getting worse.
And so that was very suspicious to us. Somebody in his family is probably giving him arsenic somehow, so we need to stop any unsupervised visits with the family, and that's what stopped him from being poisoned while he was in the hospital. And he survived with the largest amount of arsenic ever discovered in a human being in North America who lived to tell about it, I think. It was just a miracle he lived. I don't know how he survived. I don't think the doctors do either. When Raymond got sick and went to the hospital, she was always there every day visiting him. And so then they decided, well, we better exhume Raymond Reed and get an autopsy. And the toxicologist at the time was able to analyze the liver, the bones, tissues, and he found, yes, homicidal levels of arsenic in Raymond Reed.
You won't find anything there.
You're wrong, but we'll give her permission.
Daddy had more arsenic than anybody. I felt like I was in somebody's novel, and nothing seemed very real to me. You're just trying to wrap your head around it, but you really can't, because every time you try to wrap your head around one thing, then something else is thrown out at you.
They exhumed 5 bodies at least. I know they exhumed her father after James Taylor. He had arsenic. They exhumed James Taylor's mother, Isla. She had arsenic in her. And then they went to a couple of co-workers. One of those bodies did not have arsenic in it, so they stopped at that point. But there were probably other people that could have exhumed, and they just said, well, we've exhumed enough.
I guess it must have been about 7. Mom was in the kitchen, and I just remember all of a sudden Dad coming through the door.
Blanche.
And I just remember him looking at her kind of funny and saying, "Your dad is at the door."
What do you mean?
He's here.
She was kind of like, you know, who? Like almost like she couldn't believe that he was there.
Why can't you just send him away?
I was aware that she didn't have a relationship with him. I had heard he was a very hateful man and he was just mean. And I had heard that he was especially mean to her.
Came a long way. It's important.
I think Dad encouraged her to just hear what he had to say.
Fine.
She walked with Dad on back into the living room.
I know I wasn't the greatest dad in the world. I had a bad temper. Maybe I drank a little.
There were no loud voices. It did not appear to be any type of argument. I really couldn't hear what was being said. She never said to me, "This is your grandfather, this is my dad." He was never allowed to speak to me or meet me. And he went back out the front door. And then the next thing I remember was that he had passed away. He was dead. We got a phone call from a friend that said, "I think you need to get home." We got to the house. There was lots of detectives. And I remember Mom saying, you know, "Please don't handcuff me in front of my daughter."
Girls, everything's gonna be all right. I didn't do anything wrong.
When she was arrested, she said, "I love you both." I did say to her, "You know, Mom, if you've done something, you can tell us. We're gonna still love you. Just tell us, because we would rather, know." And she looked us straight in the face and she said, "I have not done this."
I didn't do the things they said.
Mom, I promise you I've not done anything to your dad.
Blanche Moore has been charged with poisoning both her former husband and former boyfriend with arsenic.
I just knew that I didn't want people in this community that I loved to look at me as Blanche's daughter for the rest of my entire life.
Guys, get away!
Get away from me. Don't do it.
Blanche Moore has been charged with poisoning both her former husband and former boyfriend with arsenic. Now, we have discovered that the 56-year-old Moore is a suspect in several other cases.
You're just kind of living in this whirlwind where everyone around you, you're hearing all the stuff that's being said. I was like, oh my goodness. I honestly did not even know what to think.
There seems to be a family connection to all of the cases. Moore's former husband, James Taylor, had elevated levels of arsenic in his body. Her former boyfriend, Raymond Reed, suddenly died in 1986. And now, the police are investigating the 1970 death of Isla Taylor, who was Moore's mother-in-law at the time.
There was always something about Mom that what she told me, I just would tend to trust. And I really, truly believed that she was innocent, through the whole process.
Moore's daughters are convinced their mother is incapable of committing these crimes.
Anyone that would know her
and know the type of person that she's always come across as being and stuff, would know that she's not capable of this. During the trial, you couldn't have made me believe that my mom could have ever done any of these things. I think as human beings, we instinctively love our parents. That's what family's about. It's kind of unconditional love. My mind and my heart really wanted to believe in her, so I did.
The burden of proof we had was to prove that she killed Raymond Reed through arsenic poisoning beyond a reasonable doubt. Personally, I felt there was no doubt, but no one actually saw her put arsenic in anyone's food, so this was a largely circumstantial case. Our theory is that she put the arsenic in there and then took these foods to Baptist Hospital and would just leave them in the room or give them to a nurse to feed him later, or maybe she would feed him.
So, how you feeling?
I felt better.
Oh, look what I have for you. Don't you love it?
That looks delicious.
So you never could see her putting the arsenic in the food.
How is it?
It's delicious.
Good. Well, eat up.
We had nurses and civilian witnesses who all saw her bringing banana pudding and peanut butter milkshakes and various things to Raymond Reed.
Do you need anything else?
Oh, no, Becky, you've been great.
Okay.
Listen, I just wanted to... You've been just such a help.
I was told by the nurses that Blanchmore brought them a cake.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you.
And every nurse who ate the cake got flu-like symptoms, gastroenteritis, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. And the only nurse on the unit that didn't get sick was a nurse who was out the day the cake came and didn't eat a piece of the cake.
So when you said that he's not the man I want, you weren't complaining about it. Is that your testimony, Ms. Moore?
I'm saying that I would have married Raymond had he lived. That's what I'm saying to you, Ms. Branch.
She claimed she would have married Raymond had he lived, but we also got her financial records, and we know that she was almost broke at the time Raymond died. And she had a lawyer that she hired come to the hospital, and she had Raymond execute a will, giving her a third of his estate.
I'm saying that I would have married Raymond had he lived. That's what I'm saying to you, Ms. Branch.
I look at her and I see her up on that stand, and I think she sealed the deal for herself. Because that was just one clip of 2 days of that. 2 days of that attitude, and you see very little humility.
It's been hard, but to know my faith in God, the love of my family and friends, and my innocence that I sit here right today trying to project is what's kept me going every day of my life.
I think she sent herself to prison.
You, the jury, unanimously find the defendant Blanche K. Taylor Moore guilty of first-degree murder. Is that your verdict? So say you are.
I really didn't allow myself to think about it a lot much after it was over with. I just wanted to put it away. I just kind of tried to make my life back normal with my kids and stuff. But you felt like you were being judged along with her. I felt like that people would stereotype us as being this crazy family. And we were actually a very good family. I am her daughter, but I'm also Cindy. I really just wanted to be Cindy again and be my own person. she actually wasn't tried on Daddy because their strategy was that if she got off of this one, they would charge her with another one. This is Mom on death row. After all these years, she's still reading the Bible, and when she sends us a card, she always will put some scripture in there. When I hear someone say serial killer, I tend to think of someone that just really isn't very functional in society. Mom was very functional. She was very successful. I think it's important for people to realize that all signs of someone being a serial killer or having the ability to hurt someone else to such a degree to take their life, they're not always so obvious. Some of them are very subtle. There's little things that seem very innocent that you just don't think anything about.
The first headline didn't say murder. Not yet. It said, "Young woman missing, quiet California street on edge." The second headline came faster, darker, sharper. "Blood found inside home." Then the third one landed like a fist through glass. "Police fear foul play." And after that, the town learned a new phrase the hard way. 2 words that would cling to front porches, church steps, and school pickup lines for decades. Cold case. But if you stood on that street the night it began, California, 1994, you wouldn't have called it a case. You would have called it an interruption. A sudden silence where a life should have been. A porch light left on. A kitchen clock still ticking. A dog barking once, then not at all. A neighbor's blinds twitching like nervous eyelids. Because in the first hours, everyone wanted a simple explanation. A misunderstanding. A flat tire. A bad phone connection. Something ordinary. Something that didn't require police tape. They didn't get ordinary. It started with a routine that didn't happen. Erin Caldwell, 27, steady job, steady habits, steady smile that made strangers feel like they'd known her for years, didn't show up for her shift. Not late. Not running behind. Just absent. In 1994, you didn't text a coworker to check in. You called. You left a message. You tried again. You listened to the same hollow ring and felt your stomach tighten with every second that passed. By noon, the hospital switchboard had patched through 3 calls from the same worried nurse. By 1, Erin's supervisor was dialing her home number himself. By 2, someone drove to the address, parked at the curb, and stared at a house that looked perfectly normal. Too normal. The lawn was trimmed. The curtains were open in the front room like always. A potted plant sat on the porch, drooping in the heat. The mailbox was shut. No crash. No broken window. No screaming. Nothing to point at. That's what frightened people the most. A woman doesn't disappear from a place like this without leaving a scratch on the world. Unless someone knows how to erase the scratch. The coworker knocked. No answer. Knocked again, harder. Still nothing. She called out Erin's name, loud enough that the sound bounced off neighboring houses and came back thinner, embarrassed. And then she noticed the door. Not wide open. Not kicked in. Just not fully latched. A small thing. A domestic, everyday mistake. But Erin didn't make everyday mistakes. The coworker stepped back, walked to the side window, shaded her eyes, and peered inside. The living room looked tidy. Couch pillows aligned. A lamp turned off. A framed photo on the shelf, the kind of picture you'd see in a greeting card aisle. Erin and her parents at the beach, sunburned and laughing. No one was laughing now. She ran next door. Next door belonged to the man everyone trusted. Mark Danner. That's the name you'll see later in the boldest headlines. That's the name you'll hear whispered in the court footage years after this town's hair turned gray. But in 1994, Mark Danner was a harmless fixture. The neighbor who waved first. The neighbor who brought in your trash cans when you forgot. The neighbor who fixed a loose fence board without being asked. Trusted. Dependable. Safe. He answered quickly, like he'd been awake all day, ready. He wore jeans. A plain shirt. No sweat. No panic. He listened as the coworker stumbled through her words. Errand missing, door not latched, no answer, something's wrong, and he didn't laugh it off. He didn't call her dramatic. He didn't tell her to calm down. He said the words people want to hear when the ground starts shifting beneath them. I'll help. He crossed the lawn with her, steady as a metronome. He knocked. He called out. He tried the handle. The door gave slightly, a quiet complaint. Inside, the air was cooler. Too cool. The house held its breath. They stopped in the entryway and looked around like trespassers in a museum. A purse sat on the small table by the door. Erin's keys were there too. Not tossed, but placed. Her work badge lay beside them, plastic catching a thin stripe of sunlight. If she had left voluntarily, she didn't take her life with her. The coworker's eyes went to the kitchen. A coffee mug sat near the sink. The kind with a faded design, handled 1,000 times. The counter held a grocery flyer, folded open. A notepad with a list: milk, bread, apples, shampoo. Ordinary. 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 And then the ordinary broke. A chair was slightly out of place, angled wrong, like someone stood up too fast. A dish towel lay on the floor, crumpled, damp. And near the hallway that led to the bedrooms, there was a dark smear on the wall, small but unmistakable. Not paint. Not spilled wine. Something that made the coworker's mouth fill with metal. Mark Danner saw it too. He didn't touch it. He didn't step closer. He backed up half a pace, just enough to look cautious, responsible. Just enough to look like a man who understood boundaries. Call the police, he said. And she did. She dialed 911 from Erin's landline. In 1994, that sound mattered, the click of the receiver, the hum of the line, the operator's voice that tried to sound calm even as it sharpened with urgency. The coworker gave the address, her voice shaking. She said Erin's name. She said the door was open. She said there might be blood. The dispatcher told her to step outside and wait. They walked back out, the porch boards creaking under their feet. Mark stood with her. A watchful neighbor. A supportive man. The kind people later remembered as so kind that day. And then the street began to change. A patrol car arrived first. Then another. Officers moved with brisk politeness, asking questions, scanning faces. Someone wrote notes on a clipboard. Someone else pulled yellow tape from the trunk. The tape fluttered in the breeze like a warning flag. Curtains lifted in surrounding houses like synchronized suspicion. By late afternoon, the news vans appeared. Not all of them. Not yet. But one local station showed up, camera rolling, reporter rehearsing the first lines of a story that would be told and retold until the words lost meaning. Neighbors gathered in clusters, keeping a careful distance from the tape. Erin's coworker sat on the curb, pale and trembling, answering questions between deep breaths. Mark Danner stood nearby, hands on hips, his expression carved into concern. He told officers he hadn't seen Erin that day. He said he'd last spoken to her 2 nights ago. Friendly chat. Nothing unusual. He mentioned he'd noticed her porch light left on the previous evening but didn't think anything of it. These things happen. He sounded like a man trying to help. Police entered the home slowly, as if moving too fast might shatter the fragile truth waiting inside. What they found wasn't a body. That was the nightmare. The absence. The space where certainty should be. There were signs of a struggle, subtle, but present if you knew how to read rooms. A vase tipped over in the hall. A picture frame askew on the nightstand. A bedsheet pulled tight, cornered like it had been yanked. The smear near the hallway, now confirmed as blood. Enough to alarm, not enough to answer. The bedroom window was locked. The back door was locked. No forced entry. No broken glass. The house wasn't a crime scene in the dramatic way people imagine. It was worse. It was a place where someone had tried to keep the violence quiet. In the driveway, Erin's car sat parked neatly, nose in, as if she'd come home normally and never left. Her wallet was in her purse. Cash still inside. No suitcase missing. No note. The police started with the first questions that always come first. Boyfriend? Ex-husband? Stalker? Dead? Drugs? Enemies? Erin had no husband. No children. No record. No known stalker. She dated a man briefly the previous year, but it ended without fireworks. She paid her bills. She kept to herself. She was the kind of person small towns call good, as if goodness is protection. It isn't. Officers canvass door to door, the way they do when time is still fresh and the trail's still warm. People said what people always say in the beginning: I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything. She was so quiet. She kept her blinds open. She jogged in the mornings. She smiled when she walked her dog. Her dog. That was another detail that made the case twist. The dog wasn't missing. A medium-sized mutt, anxious, friendly, rescued from a shelter 2 years earlier. Police found it inside the home, shut in the laundry room, whining behind a closed door. Food bowl empty. Water bowl tipped. Its paws scratched the tile like it had been trying to escape. A kidnapper takes the person, not the dog. A runaway takes the dog. So why was the dog shut away? Because someone needed quiet. Because barking draws attention. Because whoever entered that house knew how to think ahead. Evidence technicians moved through Erin's home with gloves and paper bags, collecting fibers, hairs, swabs. This was 1994. DNA existed, but it wasn't magic. It was slow. Expensive. Limited. The kind of tool you used when you had a suspect, not when you had nothing but a smear and a prayer. They dusted for fingerprints. They lifted prints from the phone, the doorknob, the kitchen drawer. They photographed shoe marks in the backyard soil, faint impressions that could have belonged to anyone who'd walked there in the past week. They bagged the dish towel from the floor. They bagged the coffee mug. They bagged a single long hair stuck to the edge of the bathroom sink. They did everything right, because when you don't have a body, procedure becomes your only weapon. Outside, the neighborhood's mood curdled. Parents pulled their children indoors. Women double-locked deadbolts and kept lights on through the night. Men walked the block with baseball bats like it was a different century. People stared at each other too long. Every friendly wave turned into a silent evaluation. And at the center of it, every time the cameras panned the crowd, there was Mark Danner, hands folded, expression solemn, the picture of a man concerned for a missing neighbor. He volunteered to help search before anyone asked. He offered officers his phone number twice. He spoke to Erin's parents when they arrived, driving in from 2 counties away, faces torn raw by shock. He told them he was sorry. He told them Erin was a wonderful person. He told them the whole street would do whatever it took. The cameras caught him briefly, just a few seconds. A trusted neighbor in the frame. A good man. And it's strange, isn't it, how evil sometimes prefers to wear the uniform of decency. The first search party assembled at dawn the next day. Volunteers combed nearby trails, creek beds, vacant lots. They checked dumpsters behind grocery stores. They scanned roadside ditches. They walked with dogs and flashlights. They shouted Erin's name into canyons and waited for the echo like it might answer. Nothing. No shoe. No jacket. No blood trail leading away. No drag marks. No witness who saw a van. No neighbor who heard a scream. Only that house. Only that smear. Only that door left unlatched like a whisper. And by the third day, the headline that would define the next 3 decades finally appeared in thick, merciless letters. California 1994 cold case begins. Young nurse vanishes without a trace. A case can go cold in silence, in exhaustion, in bureaucracy, in the slow dying of leads. But sometimes it goes cold because the person who did it is standing right there, helping carry the flashlights, shaking hands, speaking softly, looking devastated. Sometimes a cold case begins the moment you decide you already know what danger looks like. And in 1994, on that bright California street, danger looked like a trusted neighbor with clean jeans and a calm voice, watching the police tape flutter as if he, too, was just trying to understand what happened. Morning came heavy over the cul-de-sac, the kind of California morning that should have felt warm but didn't. The sun rose, but no one opened their blinds. Patrol cars idled at the curb, radios whispering static. Inside the house on Maple Avenue, detectives stood in silence, staring at what wasn't there. No body. No clear sign of struggle. Just the faint scent of something metallic and final. Detective Ray Mendoza leaned on the doorway, his eyes tracing the faint smear on the hallway wall again and again. He'd been with the department 15 years, long enough to know that some houses lie, but the walls never do. This wall, he thought, was trying to talk. The lab techs finished their sweep, packing samples into brown envelopes, snapping photos with the clunky flash of a 1990s camera. Every click sounded too loud. Outside, reporters gathered like vultures waiting for movement. The word missing had already started to lose meaning. It had become something else. Taken. Mendoza flipped through Aaron Caldwell's file. Clean record. Nurse at a local clinic. Lived alone. Paid her bills early. Church on Sundays. Volunteers shifts at the food drive. No enemies. No drama. The kind of life that doesn't make headlines, until it does. By noon, the department set up a command post. A map of the area spread across a folding table. Pins. Strings. Notes scribbled on sticky pads. Last seen, Sunday, 9:30 p.m. Neighbor reported porch lights still on Monday night. Door found unlatched Tuesday morning. 3 days. That was all it took for her to disappear completely. They started calling names. Friends. Co-workers. Old roommates. Former boyfriends. Most of them answered the same way, confused, then horrified, then defensive, as if not knowing where Aaron was might somehow implicate them. Then came Mark Danner's interview. He sat in the small interrogation room at 3:45 p.m. The air conditioner rattled like it was nervous too. Mendoza watched him through the one-way glass before stepping inside. Mark was the picture of composure. Early 40s. Short hair. Work boots. Calloused hands that stayed folded on the table. He didn't fidget. He didn't blink too much. He looked like a man who'd already practiced the performance of being helpful. "Appreciate you coming in," Mendoza said, voice even. "Of course. Anything I can do to help." Mark's tone was polite. Too polite. The kind that fits perfectly in a church foyer, not in a homicide bureau. "You were the one who helped the coworker enter the house?" "Yes, sir." She was panicking. "I didn't want her to go in alone. I figured if Aaron was just asleep or something, she'd be embarrassed, you know? I thought maybe we'd find her there." "But you didn't." "No." Mark shook his head slowly. "Just that smear. I told her not to touch anything. I called it in right away." Mendoza nodded, watching his hands. "You ever notice anyone hanging around her house lately?" "No one strange. She was quiet. Kept to herself. Sometimes she'd wave when she took out her trash. That's all." "Ever go inside before that day?" Mark smiled faintly. "No, sir. I'm not that kind of neighbor." Mendoza didn't smile back. He let the silence stretch until it started to creak. "You were home Sunday night?" "Yes." "Anyone with you?" "My wife. She was asleep early. We had the kids visiting the next day." Mendoza scribbled something in his notebook but didn't look down. Your wife confirms that? She would if she were here. She's not. Mark's lips pressed together. She's at her sister's. Sacramento. Visiting for the week. Of course she was. Mendoza flipped his pen in his hand, a slow rhythm that filled the room. Mind if we take a look around your place? Mark hesitated for half a heartbeat, just enough to register. Then, sure. You can. I have nothing to hide. He didn't. Not then. Not yet. They searched his home that same evening. 2-bedroom ranch, clean. Almost too clean. The kind of tidy that feels rehearsed. Kitchen counters bare. Laundry folded. Tools lined up in the garage like soldiers on inspection. A detective opened the trash bin, nothing but fresh coffee grounds and newspaper. No food scraps. No paper towels. No clue. Mendoza noticed a stack of old newspapers by the back door. The top headline, California heatwave continues. The date was from 3 days ago. The paper underneath had a missing section, torn unevenly. A patch of dark smudge on the edge, grease, maybe? Or not. They took samples. They took everything they could justify taking. When they left, Mark stood on his porch, arms crossed, looking not angry but disappointed. Like a man who expected gratitude for cooperating. For the next few days, the investigation spread outward. Flyers printed. TV anchors repeated her name until it became its own kind of chant. Erin Caldwell, missing since Monday. The photo used in every broadcast showed her smiling into sunlight, unaware that her image would soon be frozen in time. But behind the camera lights, the detectives were running out of angles. They checked phone records. Last outgoing call, 9:47 p.m., Sunday. Incoming call from an unknown number, 9:52 p.m. After that, silence. The phone company traced the number. Payphone. Gas station. Half a mile away. Security footage from 1994 didn't do favors. It was grainy, oversaturated, and erased every 24 hours. By the time they asked, the tape was gone. The case file grew thicker. The evidence bins filled. But the answers stayed thin as smoke. Then came the first false lead. A man in Nevada claimed he saw Erin at a diner, alive. The story traveled fast. Hope always does. Detectives drove 6 hours to check it. Turned out to be a different woman. Same haircut. Different eyes. False hope added to the pile. Weeks passed. The flyers faded under sunlight. The tape around her house sagged and fluttered like tired ribbon. People stopped watching the news for updates because there were no updates left to give. But Mendoza didn't stop. He kept visiting the file after hours, tracing the map, replaying Mark Danner's interview in his mind like a broken tape. Something in that calm voice itched at him. Something didn't line up. He went back to the neighbor list, house by house. He asked questions differently this time, smaller ones, less about Erin and more about the rhythm of the street. Who parked where? Who left their lights on? Who watered their lawn after midnight? And one woman, a widow across the street, mentioned something she hadn't before. She'd seen Mark's truck that Sunday night. Parked in front of Erin's house around 10. Headlights off. She didn't think much of it then. He often offered to fix things for neighbors, she said. Maybe he was helping her with something. But there was no record of any request. No one asked Mark to fix anything. Mendoza added the note to the file. He didn't confront him right away. He waited. Watched. Sometimes you learn more from silence than from answers. Days bled into months. The case went from urgent to ongoing to unsolved. The command post was taken down. Detectives reassigned. The evidence boxes moved to a shelf marked Cold Cases, 1990s. The words felt like burial. But for Erin's parents, there was no burial. No grave. No closure. They called the station every month, asking for updates. Sometimes Mendoza answered. Sometimes he couldn't. Each time, the silence afterward grew heavier. Then, one morning in 1996, 2 years after the disappearance, something small cracked open again. A hiker found a piece of jewelry in a dry ravine 15 miles from town. A delicate silver pendant in the shape of a crescent moon. The initials EC engraved on the back. It matched the necklace Aaron was last seen wearing. The area was searched for 3 days. Nothing else found. No body. No clothing. Just that single piece, half buried in dirt, as if the earth had spat it out. The press returned briefly, smelling resurrection. New lead in 1994 California disappearance. The headlines screamed. But when the search ended with nothing, the noise faded again. Years crawled by. 1998, 2003. 2010, the town changed. The houses got repainted. The faces grew older. But the house on Maple Avenue stayed unsold, haunted not by ghosts but by reputation. People drove slower past it. Children whispered dares about touching the mailbox. Mark Danner stayed too. He aged into a friendly relic of the neighborhood. Still mowed his lawn every Saturday. Still waved to passing cars. Still spoke kindly about Erin whenever her name surfaced in conversation. A tragedy, he'd say. Such a sweet girl. I hope she's at peace. No one questioned him anymore. Time does that. It blurs suspicion until it looks like neighborly trust again. But cold cases don't die. They sleep. And technology doesn't forget. In 2019, 25 years after Erin vanished, the department's cold case unit began a review program. DNA testing had evolved into something almost surgical. Old evidence was reopened, retested, re-examined. Files that had gathered dust were suddenly breathing again. Among them, Caldwell, Erin, Case 94-217. The sealed envelopes were opened. The samples retested. The long hair from the bathroom's sink. The dish towel. The coffee mug. And this time, the machines found what the old microscopes couldn't. A partial male DNA profile. Faint but usable. It didn't match anyone in the system at first. Not criminals. Not known offenders. But California had a new tool, familial DNA matching. Instead of looking for the person, it looked for relatives. The search ran through the database. It pinged once. A distant relative. Male. Age 22. Arrested 2 years earlier for a DUI in Sacramento County. The name meant nothing at first. Danner, Michael. Mendoza, now retired, got the call anyway. He was living 3 towns over, gray-haired and half-forgotten himself. But when the detective on the line said that name, Danner, he sat upright like someone had whispered electricity through the phone. "Run the relation," he said. The computer did. Michael Danner. Nephew of Mark Danner. The DNA overlap was too close to be coincidence. Not a perfect match, but a 25% correlation. Enough to point the gun barrel in one direction. The cold case was awake again. Search warrants were drafted. Old evidence files reopened. Mark's property, now expanded with a workshop behind the house, was searched in 2020. They dug the backyard, scanned with ground-penetrating radar, catalogued every nail and scrap of wood. And near the back fence, under a layer of compacted soil, they found something small but impossible to ignore. A hair tie. A fragment of cloth. And a bone the size of a finger. Tests confirmed it. Erin Caldwell. 26 years later, she was finally found, piece by piece, like a secret that refused to stay buried. The arrest warrant followed within days. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted. And for the first time, the headlines had a new line to write. California 1994 cold case solved. DNA twist exposes trusted neighbor. But behind that victory headline was the deeper horror, the question everyone whispered, too afraid to ask out loud. How long had he lived among them, waving, smiling, mowing his lawn, while she lay just yards away under his feet. And why, after all those years, did his calm never break? Because the truth was still unfolding. And Mark Danner hadn't said a single word. The arrest didn't happen like people imagine. No dramatic chase, no door kicked in on live television, no villain running barefoot across a lawn. It happened the way nightmares often do in real life, quietly, efficiently, in broad daylight, while the neighborhood still smelled like fresh-cut grass. A black and white cruiser rolled into Maple Avenue just after 7 a.m. Another followed. Then an unmarked sedan. Engines off. Doors opening softly. Radios murmuring in clipped codes. The kind of choreography that looks calm until you realize it's built for one purpose: control. Across the street, a woman watering her roses froze mid-spray. The water kept hissing into the dirt like a secret being spilled. A man pulling out of his driveway stopped with his car half in the street, half in his life. Curtains lifted. Phones came out. Hands covered mouths. Someone whispered the words that don't belong in a suburb. "They're at Mark's." Mark Danner stepped outside before anyone knocked. He wore a windbreaker. Khaki pants. A man dressed for errands, for hardware stores, for ordinary. He stood on his porch with the calm posture of someone who believed the world would always treat him gently. His eyes flicked from face to face, officers, detectives, a uniformed sergeant with paperwork in hand, and he didn't look confused. He looked prepared. The sergeant read the warrant. Words that sounded like steel: arrest, homicide, Aaron Caldwell, human remains. The street swallowed the syllables and held them in its throat. Mark didn't yell. Mark didn't run. Mark didn't even blink fast. He raised his hands, slow, almost courteous, like he didn't want to inconvenience anyone. The cuffs clicked shut, metal-biting skin, and the neighborhood watched the trusted neighbor get folded into the back seat of a patrol car like a piece of furniture being returned to a store. A camera zoomed in on his face through the tinted glass. No tears. No shock. Just an expression that could have been mistaken for annoyance, like someone had interrupted his morning schedule. The first breaking news banner hit TVs within minutes. Cold case arrest shocks quiet California suburb. Then the second. Neighbor accused after decades-old disappearance. Then the third, the one that made people grip their coffee mugs too hard. Remains found near suspect's home. Every headline was a slap. And every slap came with the same aftertaste: he was right there. At the station, Mark was processed like any other suspect. Fingerprints inked. Photographs taken under harsh fluorescent light. Shoelaces removed. Belt removed. Pockets emptied. He didn't complain. He didn't ask for a lawyer right away, which was either confidence or calculation, hard to tell with men like him. Detective Lena Arnett, Cold Case Unit, sat across from him in Interview Room B. New generation. New eyes. Not the weary instincts of the 90s, but something sharper, trained on decades of lessons about how monsters blend in. She slid a folder across the table. "Mark Danner," she said, voice flat. "Do you know why you're here?" Mark's gaze lingered on the folder like it offended him. "You already know why you brought me in." Arnett nodded once, as if she'd expected that. "Then tell me what you know about Aaron Caldwell." Mark leaned back, slow. The chair creaked. "I told police everything back then." "Back then," Arnett repeated, like a pin pushed into a bruise. "Back then you said you barely knew her. Just waved. Just neighbor stuff." "That's right." "And back then," Arnett continued, "you said you never went inside her house before the day she was reported missing." Mark's eyes didn't move. "That's right." Arnett opened the folder. Photos slid out, glossy, brutal. A patch of compacted soil behind his fence. A marker flag. A gloved hand holding a fragment of cloth. A small bone laid on sterile gauze like something sacred. Mark's face stayed still. Arnett watched for micro-reactions, tightening around the eyes, lips twitching, a swallow too hard. He gave her nothing. You know what these are? She asked. Mark exhaled through his nose. Looks like you found something in my yard. In your yard? Arnett echoed. Behind your fence. Within walking distance of your back door. I've lived there a long time, Mark said smoothly. People dump things. Animals drag things. Animals, Arnett repeated, her voice colder now. Animals buried a human bone under compacted soil? Mark shrugged, almost bored. I don't know what you think you've got. Arnett didn't argue. She didn't need to. She slid another paper forward. Lab results, black ink on white. Aaron Caldwell's DNA, she said. Confirmed. For the first time, Mark's eyes narrowed. Not fear, calculation. A man reassessing the shape of the room. That's impossible, he said, and the word landed too quickly, too cleanly. You can't confirm that. Arnett leaned in. This isn't 1994. Silence. The air conditioner rattled. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang and rang until it stopped. Mark's gaze drifted to the corner of the room where the camera sat. He knew he was being recorded. He'd probably known since the moment the cruiser turned onto his street. Men like him always know when the spotlight shifts. Arnett waited, letting the quiet press against him like a weight. Finally, Mark spoke again. I want a lawyer. There it was. The drawbridge lifting. Arnett pushed her chair back and stood. You'll get one, she said. But I'm going to tell you something before I leave. Mark didn't respond. He stared ahead like a man watching a storm through a window. Arnett's voice sharpened, each word clipped and heavy. Your DNA didn't come from nowhere. It came from evidence collected in Aaron Caldwell's home. Evidence your department couldn't use back then, evidence you thought would never matter. Mark's jaw flexed once. Just once. Arnett turned to the door. And now, she said, it matters. She left him with the sound of the lock clicking shut. Outside the station, the press conference was already forming like a ritual. Cameras on tripods. Microphones with foam cubes bearing station logos. Reporters trading whispers, hungry for the kind of story that feeds a news cycle for weeks. Chief of Police Harper stepped up to the podium with a measured face that tried to look professional over the raw astonishment underneath. He spoke in the language law enforcement always uses when the world is watching, careful, restrained, legally safe. But the message pierced through anyway. We have made an arrest in the disappearance of Aaron Caldwell. The crowd reacted like a wave. A collective gasp. A murmur. A flood of questions shouted at once. Was she murdered? How was he caught? Why now? Harper raised a hand. This case was reopened as part of our cold case initiative. Advances in forensic science, particularly DNA and familial matching, provided a new investigative avenue. A search warrant was executed. Human remains were located. Identification has been confirmed. The most important sentence came last, and it hit like thunder. The suspect lived next door. A camera zoomed in on Harper's face as he said it, because the public needs faces when the truth turns grotesque. Across town, Aaron Caldwell's parents watched the press conference in their living room, older now, shoulders curved under decades of waiting. Aaron's mother, hair gone white, hands still trembling the same way they had when she first dialed the police, pressed her palm to her mouth and cried without sound. Her father didn't cry. He stared at the screen like it was showing him a new kind of violence. Next door, he whispered, as if the words were poison. For years they had pictured a stranger. A passing predator. A nameless shadow. But the shadow had a name. A face. A lawn that had been mowed every weekend. That knowledge doesn't heal. It cuts deeper. The detectives didn't stop at the bone fragment and the cloth. They couldn't. A partial discovery is still a question mark, and question marks don't hold up in court. They returned to Mark's property with a methodical hunger. The backyard became a grid of string and stakes. Forensic teams moved like surgeons. Soil was sifted, bagged, labeled. Every fragment logged. Every inch photographed. The ground-penetrating radars swept back and forth, its screen flickering like a heartbeat. The neighborhood watched from behind curtains, and some of them realized with nausea that they'd attended barbecues in that yard. They'd laughed there. They'd eaten burgers while the earth underneath held a secret. Then the K9 unit arrived. A dog trained to detect human decomposition pulled hard toward the back corner, near the fence line, then froze. The handler followed, eyes narrowed, and the dog sat, still, certain. The kind of certainty that makes grown men swallow hard. They dug again. More bone. Smaller pieces. A tooth. A bit of fabric that looked like it had once been soft. A rusted zipper. Threads clinging to soil like memory refusing to let go. Enough to confirm what everyone feared but no one wanted to say out loud: Aaron hadn't just vanished. Aaron had been hidden. The search expanded to Mark's workshop. It was a newer structure behind the house, built years after 1994, according to permits. A tidy little building with a lock, a workbench, neatly arranged tools. A place a neighbor might envy. A place that looked harmless. Detective Arnett stood in the doorway and felt her skin tighten. Something about how clean it was. How intentional. How staged. They photographed everything. Swabbed surfaces. Opened drawers. Tested drains. Lifted floor mats. The first sweep found nothing obvious, which meant one of two things: Mark was innocent, or Mark was careful. Then a technician noticed it, a section of flooring that didn't match the others. Same color, same pattern, but the nails were newer. The wood grain ran slightly off. It was a patch. They pried it up. Underneath was a shallow cavity in the concrete foundation, sealed in plastic sheeting and duct tape that had aged into brittle gray. Inside were items that belonged to no workshop. A necklace chain with a broken clasp. A small, faded work badge, plastic cracked, photo still visible. Erin's photo. Her eyes stared up at the ceiling of a man's secret compartment, frozen in the same smile that had once looked so safe. A detective muttered, barely audible, "Jesus!" But there was no Jesus in that hole. Only proof. They bagged the items like holy relics. They logged them. They photographed them. They treated them with reverence because these were pieces of a woman's life returned from a man's darkness. And still, the biggest question sat in the air like smoke. Why? Why Aaron? Why that night? Why would a trusted neighbor, no record, no known violence, a man who waved and helped and smiled, cross the line from ordinary to monstrous? The detectives tried to build the timeline backward, because forward had been stolen. Phone records from 1994 were re-examined. The unknown payphone call at 9:52 p.m. Now it looked different. Now it looked like a lure, or a check, or a signal. They pulled old gas station maintenance logs, credit card receipts, anything that survived in storage boxes and forgotten archives. A miracle turned up in a place no one expected: a box of old incident reports from the gas station, filed for insurance purposes. In one report, the clerk mentioned a customer complaint, someone using the payphone for a long time. A pickup truck idling nearby, headlights off. Pickup truck. Mark Danner drove a pickup truck. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't even enough for court by itself. But it was a stitch. And stitches make a case. They interviewed neighbors again, older now, remembering through layers of time and regret. A widow admitted she'd seen Mark's truck at Aaron's curb that Sunday night. Another neighbor remembered hearing a single loud thump around 10, dismissing it as a dropped box or a slammed door. A teenager at the time, now in his 40s, remembered seeing Mark walking across the lawn with something in his hands, covered by a tarp. All those memories had existed in the neighborhood like loose nails on the floor, stepped over, ignored. Now the detectives picked them up one by one, turning them in the light. Mark's attorney called the arrest a rush to judgment. He said the evidence was circumstantial. He said Mark had cooperated in 1994. He said the public should withhold assumptions. But the public didn't withhold anything. The town turned into a furnace of suspicion and self-blame. People replayed every interaction they'd ever had with Mark Danner. The waves. The smiles. The small favors. Every moment of neighborly kindness became contaminated, retroactively poisoned. A woman who used to bring him Christmas cookies told a reporter she felt sick. "I gave him my children's names," she said, voice cracking. "I let my kids go over there for lemonade." A man who'd shared beers with Mark in the driveway stared into the camera and whispered the words everyone was thinking. "We were living next to a grave." And through it all, Mark Danner remained silent. No confession. No explanation. Just a man in a jail uniform, eyes flat, mouth closed, refusing to give the world the one thing it wanted more than justice. The truth. Because the deeper they dug, the clearer it became, Aaron's disappearance wasn't just a moment of violence. It was a long, deliberate act of concealment. A crime that continued every day Mark woke up, made coffee, waved at neighbors, and lived on top of what he'd done. And now that the cold case was awake, now that the ground had opened and returned its secrets, there was only one direction left for the story to go. Into the part of the darkness Mark had protected the most. The part he still hadn't told anyone. The courtroom smelled of paper, old carpet, and nerves. Reporters filled the benches like crows on a wire. The name Mark Danner had turned into a headline that refused to die, and now, after 26 years of silence, California finally had a trial that felt like a resurrection. He walked in wearing county beige, hands shackled, jaw clenched. The years had thickened him, lines at the mouth, gray at the temples, but the calm was still there. The same calm he'd worn on the porch that morning when they cuffed him. The same calm that made people question their own fear. When the bailiff called, "All rise," Aaron Caldwell's parents stood slowly, their bodies stiff, their eyes hollow. They'd waited half a lifetime for this. Around them, the room rose too, a collective motion heavy with dread and anticipation. The judge entered. Proceedings began. The microphones clicked on. The prosecutor's table was stacked with binders, each one marked with a year. 1994, 1995, 2019, 2020. The years of nothing, followed by the year of everything. Prosecutor Dana Holt rose first. Her voice was low, steady, almost surgical. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "this is not a story about mystery anymore. This is a story about access, about trust, and about the quiet horror that hides in plain sight. Erin Caldwell did not vanish into thin air. She was taken. Buried. And her killer waved to the mailman the next morning. Her hand pointed across the courtroom, fingers steady. At him. All eyes turned to Mark Danner. He didn't flinch. He looked at Holt like she was reciting weather. Holt continued, walking the jury through the timeline, Aaron's last known moments, the open door, the smear on the wall, the missing hours that never came back. She talked about the new DNA analysis, the bone fragments, the evidence found under his workshop. And then she said the words that made the room tighten. "The defendant's own family led us to him." The jury leaned forward. Holt explained how the 2019 familial DNA match, his nephew's record, had finally cracked open the silence. She held up the lab report, pages thick with data that looked like another language, and she translated it for them. "Statistically," she said, "the chance that someone other than Mark Danner left that DNA in Aaron Caldwell's home is 1 in 300 million. It was math with the sound of thunder. When she finished, the defense attorney, Russell Crane, stood. He had the kind of voice that could charm a locked door open. "Science doesn't tell us how," he said softly. "It only tells us what, and even that imperfectly. You will hear about DNA, but you will also hear about contamination, degradation, and assumptions made by people desperate to close an old file. There is no eyewitness, no confession, no video. Only dust, memory, and doubt. He turned toward the jury, his smile faint and practiced. Mr. Danner cooperated with investigators for decades. He opened his home to them. They found nothing. And now, after 26 years, when technology changes, they suddenly find pieces of evidence under a structure that didn't exist in 1994. Ask yourselves, who put them there? And when? He let that question hang, heavy as humidity. The trial unfolded like a wound reopening. Day after day, the witnesses came, some gray-haired, some shaking, all carrying pieces of a story too jagged to fit neatly together. Aaron's coworker took the stand first. The woman who'd found the door unlatched, who'd seen the smear on the wall. Her voice cracked when she said Aaron's name. She described the house exactly as she remembered, the quiet, the cold air, the purse by the door. "Do you see the man who was with you that day?" Holt asked. The woman nodded. Her hand trembled as she pointed toward the defense table. "Yes," she said. "Mark Danner." He met her eyes only once, then looked down. Next came Detective Ray Mendoza, retired, white-haired, the man who'd first walked into that house in 1994. He carried the weight of unfinished years in his posture. "We did everything we could with what we had," he told the jury. "But back then, DNA was a coin toss. We didn't have the tools. We had instincts, and they weren't enough." Holt showed him the old photos, the coffee mug, the towel, the long hair from the sink. "You collected these?" "Yes." "And they were stored properly?" "Always." "Did you ever suspect contamination?" Mendoza's gaze shifted briefly to Mark, then back. "No. Those items went from her home to the evidence locker. Nowhere else." Crane rose for cross-examination, his tone smooth. "Detective, you said you had instincts. Were those instincts telling you Mr. Danner was guilty back then?" Mendoza hesitated. "They told me something was wrong. But not enough to arrest him." "No." "So your instincts were uncertain?" Mendoza looked him in the eye. "My instincts were waiting for science to catch up." The jury wrote that down. The forensic experts followed, lab technicians explaining sequences of numbers and letters, patterns and genetic code that pointed in one direction only. Holt translated their jargon into language that pierced through the fog. The DNA on Aaron's coffee mug matched the DNA in Mark's home, and both matched the familial line from his nephew. Still, the defense pressed on contamination. Crane questioned the chain of custody, the storage temperatures, even the gloves used during evidence collection. He painted a picture of sloppy forensics, of dusty boxes and careless hands. But every expert repeated the same thing: the match was solid. The turning point came on day 11, when the prosecution introduced the discovery from the workshop, the hidden cavity, the necklace, the badge. Holt dimmed the courtroom lights. The projector whirred. On the screen appeared the photo of the small compartment under the patched floorboard, the plastic sheeting peeled back like a wound exposing its core. The jurors stared. Some flinched. "This," Holt said quietly, "is where Aaron Caldwell's story ended." She showed the necklace next. The broken clasp glinting under camera flash. Then the badge, Aaron's face staring back from 1994, frozen in the same smile the news had repeated for decades. "Who else," Holt asked, "could have hidden this here?" Crane stood immediately, objecting, but the judge overruled him. The question wasn't rhetorical. It was necessary. Holt let the silence stretch. Then she said, "There is no record of anyone else entering that workshop in the years since it was built. Permits, inspections, maintenance, all list one name." Her voice dropped. "Mark Danner." The jury's faces hardened. The air felt heavy, electric. When the defense presented its case, they tried to humanize him. They brought up neighbors who spoke of kindness, of his helpful nature. They played footage of him attending community barbecues, smiling beside kids, building fences, repairing roofs. He was part of this neighborhood, Crane said. He was the neighborhood. You cannot erase decades of decency because of one theory built on dirt and DNA. But decency can rot, and the jury could smell it. The prosecution called its final witness, Detective Lena Arnett, the woman who'd reopened the case. Her testimony was quiet but surgical. She explained how the familial DNA hit had surfaced, how the warrant was obtained, how every inch of the Danner property was documented before a single shovel touched soil. She described the moment they found the bone fragment, how the dog froze, how the air seemed to change, how even the ground felt like it was holding its breath. Then Holt asked the question everyone was waiting for. Detective, after everything you've seen, after the evidence, the DNA, the location of the remains, do you have any doubt that Mark Danner is responsible for Aaron Caldwell's death? Arnett looked directly at him. No doubt at all. The courtroom went silent except for the hum of the lights. When it was the defense's turn to rest, Crane surprised everyone by calling Mark himself to the stand. He rose, walked slowly, sat down. The cuffs were gone, but the weight wasn't. Crane's tone was gentle. Mr. Danner, did you kill Aaron Caldwell? Mark looked at the jury. His voice, when it came, was calm, too calm. No. I did not. Crane nodded. Did you ever harm her? No. Did you ever enter her home before she was reported missing? No. Crane turned toward the jury, satisfied. Nothing further. Holt stood. The room tightened. Mr. Danner, she said, you lived next door to Aaron for how long? 8 years. You knew her schedule? Not really. You saw her often? Sometimes. You were the one who entered her house the day she was reported missing? Yes. You saw blood on the wall? Yes. You told the witness to call the police? Yes. You helped her search? Yes. You were the one who suggested she not touch anything? Mark paused. Yes. Holt stepped closer, her voice dropping into a tone the jury couldn't look away from. So you were there when the first scene was discovered. You were the first man to see the blood. You were the first man to know she was gone. And 26 years later, we find her bones under your fence and her badge under your floor. Mark's throat moved once, a hard swallow. I didn't put them there. Then who did? Silence. Who else had access to your property? No answer. Holt's voice cut sharper. Who else, Mr. Danner? Mark finally looked up. His eyes flicked toward the jurors, then back to Holt. I can't help what people believe, he said quietly. But I didn't kill her. Holt studied him. Maybe not with your hands, she said. But you killed her every day you kept the truth buried. Crane objected, but the damage was done. The jury deliberated for 18 hours. Long enough for reporters to circle the courthouse like vultures, long enough for speculation to bloom on every screen in America. When they returned, their faces were pale, unreadable. The foreperson stood, holding the paper like it was heavier than it should be. The clerk asked the question. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have. In the case of the People versus Mark Danner, how do you find? A pause. Breathless. Eternal. Guilty. The word dropped like thunder. Aaron's mother collapsed into her husband's arms. Reporters shouted. Cameras flashed. Mark Danner didn't move. He sat perfectly still, as if the verdict hadn't been spoken at all. His lips moved once, barely audible. What did he say? Someone whispered. The court reporter caught it. Mark had murmured, You still don't know everything. The meaning hung in the air like smoke, curling, twisting, refusing to vanish. Because even with a conviction, even with DNA and bones and justice stamped on paper, there was something unfinished. Something still buried somewhere in that town. Something only he knew. They called it closure, but closure felt nothing like this. The verdict had been read, the cameras had packed up, and the courthouse steps were empty except for a few stray cigarette butts and the echo of reporters' shoes fading down the sidewalk. Mark Danner, convicted murderer, had been led away in cuffs. The town exhaled, but it wasn't relief. It was exhaustion. On Maple Avenue, yellow tape still flapped around his house like a ghost refusing to leave. The grass had grown wild. The mailbox leaned open, full of junk mail that no one dared touch. The workshop, the place where they'd found the hidden badge, was sealed tight with a steel padlock. Evidence custody stickers plastered the door like scars. Across the street, Margaret Lewis, Aaron Caldwell's mother, stood with a bouquet of white lilies. Her hands shook as she placed them near the fence line where the remains were found. It wasn't a grave, not officially, but in her heart, this was where her daughter's voice had last echoed. A soft breeze carried the smell of dust and sunburned soil. Somewhere far off, a dog barked once, then stopped. "She's home now," a neighbor murmured. But Margaret didn't answer. She just stared at the ground, at the dirt that had betrayed her for 26 years. "He was right there," she whispered. "All this time." The words traveled nowhere, lost in the hum of silence. Inside the jail, the man who'd once been the most trusted neighbor in California sat in a concrete cell, staring at a blank wall. The fluorescent light flickered, humming like a wasp trapped in a jar. Mark Danner hadn't spoken since the verdict. Not to the guards. Not to his lawyer. Not to the chaplain who'd stopped by with a Bible and a look of pity. He didn't look angry. He didn't look afraid. He looked like a man studying something invisible in the air. When a reporter from the Sacramento Chronicle sent him a letter, just one question, written by hand, Mark wrote back. The question was simple: why did you do it? His answer was stranger. He wrote, "People only ever ask what happened to her. No one asks what happened before." The paper published that line in bold print. The quotes spread like gasoline. Talk shows dissected it. True crime forums exploded with theories. Some said it was a taunt. Others said it was the beginning of a confession. But the one person who couldn't stop thinking about it was Detective Lena Arnett. She'd been the one to find the badge under the floorboard, the one who'd built the case from DNA and silence. She'd spent months buried in evidence, boxes, maps, records, transcripts, until the truth finally took shape. But now that the trial was over, she couldn't stop seeing that single sentence. No one asks what happened before. Before what? Before Aaron's disappearance? Before that night? Before the town started trusting the wrong man? The line felt like a crack in a mirror, reflecting something she'd missed. Arnett went back to the station, late at night, when the bullpen was empty and the vending machine buzzed in the dark. She pulled the Caldwell file again. The pages smelled like old dust and ink, the edges curled with age. She began to read, not forward but backward. From the newest pages to the oldest. From the verdict back to the moment the call came in, 1994. Every photograph. Every interview. Every report. And somewhere between the statements and the crime scene sketches she saw it. A small detail buried in the early notes. April 3, 1994. Subject Aaron Caldwell reported receiving repeated late-night phone calls. Caller hung up when answered. No trace obtained. No suspect identified. The line had been scribbled in a patrol officer's handwriting and then ignored. It didn't fit the disappearance timeline because it happened months before. But now, with Mark's words echoing in her head, it didn't feel meaningless. She dug deeper. The phone records from that period had been summarized but not fully analyzed. They'd been too routine to matter. But Arnett had access to tools those detectives didn't. She requested the archived billing logs from the old phone company. The data arrived days later in a thick manila envelope. One number appeared again and again. Always late. Always brief. Always from a payphone less than a mile from Maple Avenue. The same gas station. The same one from the night Erin vanished. And all the calls stopped exactly a week before she disappeared. A chill slid through Arnett's chest. If those calls were from Mark, and there was every reason now to think they were, it meant he'd been watching her long before that night. Testing boundaries. Measuring responses. Building comfort. But then came another question: what was the trigger? Why that night? Why the sudden violence after months of control? She combed through Erin's schedule from that week, cross-referencing clinic records, shift rosters, social events. And there it was, a notation in a coworker's diary. Erin said she told the neighbors she was moving next month. Said she found an apartment closer to work. Arnett leaned back in her chair. The pieces aligned like magnets snapping together. Erin had told Mark she was leaving. Leaving the neighborhood. Leaving his reach. That was the spark. The one thing he couldn't control. He didn't attack her in rage. He acted in panic. The panic of losing ownership over something he'd already decided was his. The realization hit like a wave she couldn't breathe through. Arnett stared at the old crime scene photos again. The open door, the mug, the towel, the smear on the wall. It wasn't chaos. It was desperation. A man trying to stop time. She could almost see it, the last moments. Erin coming home after her shift, setting her keys on the table, hanging up her purse. Maybe she heard a knock. Maybe she saw him through the window, smiling that calm neighbor smile. Maybe she opened the door because that's what you do in safe neighborhoods. And then, something snapped. One sharp movement. One heartbeat too long. A hand over her mouth. The sudden silence of the house closing around her. Arnett closed the file and rubbed her temples. Her reflection in the glass window looked older than she felt. Even with the verdict, even with the truth, there was no victory. Because this wasn't a story about monsters hiding in shadows. It was about monsters hiding in plain sight, and how ordinary people hand them the keys. Weeks later, the department allowed a final controlled demolition of Mark Danner's workshop. Public record, final step in evidence disposal. The structure came down in less than an hour. Reporters filmed from across the street, hoping for one last angle, one last headline. When the debris settled, an investigator flagged something small, half buried in the soil under what had been the concrete slab. A metal box. Rusted. Locked. The key was gone, so they pried it open with a screwdriver. Inside were items sealed in plastic, letters, photographs, and a small cassette tape. The letters were written in neat, slanted handwriting. Addressed to EC. None had been mailed. You don't see me, but I see you. I fixed the light on your porch. You left your window open again. Be careful. Notes that looked protective on the surface, but underneath, they were surveillance. Possession. The photographs were worse. Grainy snapshots taken through windows, through blinds, through the gaps in her fence. Erin reading, cooking, sitting on her porch with coffee. And the tape. When they played it, the sound was distorted, aged. Static filled the first few seconds. Then a voice. Male. Calm. Familiar. April 12th, 9:40 p.m. She came home late again. Waved at me. Smiled. She doesn't know I'm recording. One day she will. It wasn't a confession in the legal sense, but it was the missing heartbeat in the story. When Arnett heard the tape, she didn't feel satisfaction. She felt cold. Because it meant he hadn't acted on impulse. He'd planned. He'd practiced. He'd recorded himself watching. She closed the recorder and stared at the wall for a long time. Later, she walked out to the site where the workshop had stood. The dirt looked freshly turned, the air heavy with heat. She crouched down, pressed her hand against the ground, and whispered, not to the killer, but to the victim. You were right to trust the light, she said softly. You just didn't know who kept it on. The wind moved through the empty yard, carrying dust and memory. And somewhere, miles away, in a prison cell too quiet to contain its ghosts, Mark Danner smiled for the first time in months. He wasn't smiling at freedom. He wasn't smiling at guilt. He was smiling at the thought that even with everything dug up, even with every secret exposed, he'd still kept one thing buried. Something no one else had found. Something that still waited under California dirt, patient as the night. Because monsters don't need freedom. They just need to be remembered. The town wanted the story to end the way headlines end, bold, final, satisfied. Guilty. Justice. Cold case closed. But real endings don't sound like gavel strikes. They sound like dirt shifting. They sound like a box being pried open under a collapsed workshop. They sound like an old cassette tape coughing static into the present, and a calm male voice describing a woman's life like it belonged to him. When that tape surfaced, it didn't bring relief. It brought a second sickness. Because it rewrote the timeline. It said this wasn't a sudden crime. It was a slow one. A crime that began long before Aaron vanished, and continued long after, wrapped in routines so normal the neighborhood applauded them. Detective Lena Arnett sat alone in the evidence room with the tape rewound, listening again with her eyes closed, letting the voice paint the same picture over and over. April 12th. 9:40 p.m. She came home late again. Not anger. Not panic. Observation. Documentation. A man narrating his obsession like a weather report. She thought about the line he murmured after the guilty verdict, barely loud enough for the court reporter to catch. You still don't know everything. That sentence didn't sound like a threat. Arnett didn't sleep that night. She didn't go home. She stayed at her desk, lights low, file drawers open, pulling maps, old reports, missing person flyers from the 90s that had been scanned into the system and forgotten. Because if Mark Danner had been watching Aaron for months, maybe years, then the question wasn't just how he did it. The question was how many times. The next morning, she walked into the records division and asked for everything connected to Mark Danner that wasn't the Caldwell case: old address histories, utility transfers, employment records, DMV changes, anything that showed where he'd been before Maple Avenue, before the Good Neighbor Act, before the lawn mowing Saturdays. The clerk raised an eyebrow. You think there's more? Arnett didn't answer. She didn't need to. The tape had already answered for her. By noon, she had a timeline laid out on her desk like a body on a table. Mark Danner had lived in 3 other California towns before Maple Avenue. Before California, there was a 2-year stretch in Oregon in the late 80s. Before that, a short stint in Nevada. Each move looked normal on paper. Work transfers, family reasons, the kind of explanations that hide in plain ink. Arnett circled one Oregon address in red. Because a name in an Oregon file had appeared in her mind the moment she saw that blood smear photo from Aaron's hallway, a case older detectives sometimes mentioned like a ghost story when they wanted rookies to shut up and listen. A woman missing. No forced entry. Blood in the hall. Dog locked in a room. It was the same shape of nightmare, just wearing a different dress. She called Oregon. Cold Case Unit, Lane County. A tired detective answered, voice cautious, like he'd been disappointed by hope too many times. Arnett gave her name, her badge number, and then she said the words that turned the silence on the other end into a slow inhale. I'm calling about a missing woman from 1988. Case number ends in 611. I think my suspect lived next door. There was a pause long enough to feel the weight of it. Then the Oregon detective asked, What's your suspect's name? Mark Danner. On the other end, the detective didn't speak for a moment, and when he did, his voice had changed, sharper, older, haunted. Send me what you've got. Records moved faster than they should when fear fuels them. By late afternoon, Arnett had an email attachment from Oregon, scanned photos, statements, a yellowed report written on a typewriter. A woman named Heather Klein, 24, vanished from a rental duplex in 1988. The first officer on scene noted a smear of blood near the hallway. A dog found locked in a bathroom, frantic. No sign of forced entry. A neighbor described hearing a single loud thump around 10 p.m. and then nothing. Arnett stared at the page until the letters blurred. The pattern wasn't coincidence. It was a signature. And signatures don't happen once. The next headline wasn't from a journalist. It was from Arnett's own mind, written in the style of dread. Possible serial pattern emerges. Convicted neighbor tied to earlier disappearance. But patterns need proof, and proof doesn't come from feelings. It comes from soil, paper, DNA, and the slow grinding patience of people who refuse to stop. Arnett brought the Oregon file to her captain. The captain listened, face tightening, as she walked him through the similarities: locked pets, blood smears, no forced entry, the calm neighbor, the time of night, the quiet house. "You're saying," he murmured, "he may have done this before." Arnett didn't blink. "I'm saying he didn't learn to hide a body on his first try." A new task force formed quietly. No press conference. No microphones. They weren't going to feed the public another wave of panic until they had something solid. But inside the station, the air changed. Detectives spoke softer. They looked at old cases differently. The phrase cold case stopped sounding like history and started sounding like a warning. They pulled Mark Danner's prison visitation logs. Who came to see him? Who called? Who wrote? Most names were predictable. Lawyers, a distant cousin, one former coworker who claimed he couldn't believe it. Then there was one surprise, a woman's name that appeared once and never again. Claire Danner. His wife. The woman he had casually placed in Sacramento back in 1994 like a chess piece, always away when questions sharpened, always just out of frame. Arnett requested an interview. It took a week to locate her because Claire Danner had become a person who lived like she was hiding from weather. Small apartment, no social media, no listed phone number, a mailbox that never stayed full. When Arnett finally sat across from her in a quiet interview room, Claire didn't look like the spouse of a monster. She looked like someone who'd survived a long illness. Her hands were clasped so tightly the knuckles were pale. Her eyes didn't stop moving, door, camera, table, Arnett's face, then down again. "I don't know what you want from me," Claire said. Arnett kept her voice level. "I want the truth. About 1994. About Oregon. About what you saw, what you heard, what you knew." Claire's jaw tightened. "I didn't know." "That's what everyone says," Arnett replied, not cruel, just tired. "The neighbors. The friends. The people who shared beers with him. But you lived with him. You woke up next to him. You knew what his silence sounded like." Claire stared at the table as if it might open and swallow her. "Mark had moods," she whispered. "He'd get fixated. Not like romantic. Like he needed to win something. Control something." Arnett leaned forward slightly. "Did he ever fixate on Aaron Caldwell?" Claire's lips parted, then closed. The delay was the answer before the words arrived. "He watched her," Claire admitted, voice thin. "He said he worried about her. Said she left her windows open. Said she didn't lock her door right. He made it sound protective." She swallowed. "He liked being needed." Arnett's stomach tightened. "Did you ever confront him?" Claire gave a small laugh that wasn't laughter. "You don't confront Mark. Not if you want peace in your own house." The room felt colder. Arnett asked the question that had been chewing at her since she'd seen the workshop patch in the floor. "Claire," she said, "did you ever find anything? Letters? Photos? Recordings?" Claire's eyes lifted for the first time and met Arnett's, and in them was something ugly, regret mixed with fear. "I found a box," she whispered. Arnett's voice lowered. "When?" Claire's mouth trembled. "After Aaron disappeared. A week or two. He was in the shower, and I went into the garage. I don't even know why. I just felt it. She pressed her fingertips to her temple like it hurt to remember. There was a metal cash box tucked behind paint cans. I opened it. Arnett held still. What was inside? Pictures, Claire said. Of Erin. Through her kitchen window. Through her blinds. And a piece of fabric. A little strip. Like it was cut from something. Her voice cracked. I put it back. I closed it. I told myself I was wrong. Why? Arnett demanded, the word escaping sharper than she intended. Claire flinched. Because I didn't want to become the next Erin, she whispered. The sentence landed heavy and quiet. Not melodrama. Survival math. Arnett stared at her, seeing the whole neighborhood through a new lens. How people protect themselves by not looking too closely. How fear turns into silence and silence turns into a grave. Did you ever tell anyone? Arnett asked. Claire shook her head slowly. I left him 2 years later. I told myself if I walked away, I'd be safe. That was the deal I made with my own conscience. Arnett let the silence sit, thick and bitter. Then she asked the question that mattered now. Did you know about Oregon? Claire's eyes widened slightly, a reflex that couldn't be faked. Oregon? She repeated. Arnett watched her face hard. He lived there in the late 80s. A woman disappeared. Same signs. Same quiet. Claire's breath came out in a shaky exhale. He told me, she whispered, that we left Oregon because people were nosy. That's what he called them. Nosy. Arnett felt something click into place, a lock opening in her mind. Moves weren't random. They were escapes. And if he escaped Oregon after a disappearance, he could have escaped anywhere else too. After the interview, Arnett walked out into the parking lot and stared at the evening sky, the California sun sinking behind power lines like a dying flare. Her phone buzzed, an incoming call from a number she didn't recognize. She answered. A man's voice, older, cautious. Detective Arnett? This is Deputy Callahan. Lane County, Oregon. You asked me to look at our evidence. Arnett's heartbeat tightened. Yes. Callahan's next words came slow, measured. We still have a preserved hair sample from Heather Klein's bathroom sink, he said. Back then, we couldn't do anything with it. But now we can. Arnett's mouth went dry. And it's going to take a few days, Callahan said. But I need you to know something else. We re-interviewed a witness. She said the neighbor who helped that night, who offered to check the house, who told her to call the police, was a man named Mark. Mark Danner. Arnett closed her eyes for a second, feeling the story tighten like a noose. The trusted neighbor. The helpful man. The calm voice. Again. When she opened her eyes, she saw the same thing she'd seen since the day she reopened Erin Caldwell's file. The thin line between safety and horror, and how easily people mistake one for the other. The next morning, the press finally caught the scent. A leak, small, inevitable. A single reporter posted a sentence online, and it spread like flame across dry brush. New investigation links convicted trusted neighbor to other cold cases. Phones rang. Emails flooded. Producers called. The department issued the usual non-statement. We are reviewing information. No further comment. But the town didn't need confirmation. The town already knew what it felt like to be fooled. The real confirmation came not from a press release, but from a lab. 3 days later, the Oregon detective called back. Arnett picked up on the first ring. Callahan didn't waste time. We ran the DNA from the hair, he said. It's degraded, but we got enough. Arnett stood very still, one hand braced on the edge of her desk. It matches, Callahan said. Mark Danner. For a moment, there was no sound in Arnett's office except the faint buzz of fluorescent lights, like insects trapped behind glass. 2 states. 2 women. 2 missing lives stitched together by one man's quiet competence at erasing people. Arnett hung up and stared at the wall, and the wall stared back, blank and indifferent. Because solving Aaron Caldwell's case hadn't ended the story. It had just exposed the first layer. And somewhere beneath that, beneath Oregon, beneath California, beneath the neat lawn and the locked workshop, there was still the thing Mark had promised with that courtroom whisper. You still don't know everything. And the worst part was this, he was probably right. The news broke quietly, the way earthquakes sometimes begin, with a small tremor that no one feels until the walls start to crack. A single online headline first, then 2, then an avalanche. Convicted California killer linked to 1988 Oregon disappearance. Within hours, every major outlet had the story, the kind of headline that made people read twice. For 26 years, Mark Danner had been the monster who hid in one neighborhood. Now, he was something bigger. Something older. Something that had crossed state lines long before anyone knew to look. Inside the prison where he served his sentence, reporters began filing interview requests like confessions. He refused them all. The warden said he hadn't spoken a full sentence in months. Just that same eerie calm, the same half-smile that looked like it belonged to someone who knew the ending of a story no one else had read. Detective Lena Arnett watched the coverage from her office, coffee cooling beside her hand. The Oregon confirmation had taken less than a week, but it felt like a lifetime. She had seen killers before, men who shouted, cried, swore they were innocent, but Danner was different. He didn't perform evil. He embodied it. Quiet, polite, and endlessly patient. The department's phones rang nonstop. Families of missing women began calling in, voices shaking, each one asking the same question, could it be him? They listed names, years, towns. One after another. People who disappeared from small communities between the late 80s and the early 2000s. Arnett started writing them down, one column, then another. A grim list stretching across the whiteboard. Heather Klein, 1988, Oregon. Aaron Caldwell, 1994, California. And then gaps, unexplained vanishings that might fit the pattern. Women who lived alone. Women whose cases went cold. Women who had trusted someone. Every detective has a moment when they realize a case isn't just a crime. It's a map. And the map of Mark Danner's life was filled with small towns and short leases. Jobs that never lasted long. A trail of polite exits and sudden moves. She called Oregon again. Then Nevada. Then even further back, his childhood in Bakersfield, his early jobs, his high school records. Each call added another puzzle piece, each file another ghost. By the end of the week, a theory was forming, not that Danner snapped, but that he repeated. He didn't just kill, he relocated his guilt, moving it like luggage from one town to the next, burying it under freshly cut lawns and friendly smiles. The warden finally granted Arnett a visit. No cameras, no press, no microphones. Just her, a recorder, and a man in beige prison clothes sitting across a scratched metal table. The guard stepped outside but stayed close enough to hear. Mark Danner looked older than his mugshot, hair silver gray, eyes still sharp. He folded his hands neatly. I wasn't expecting you, he said. His voice was low, measured. I wasn't asking, Arnett replied. He smiled slightly, the way a teacher might when a student shows promise. You found Oregon. We did. His eyes gleamed. You must be proud. She ignored the bait. How many, Mark? He leaned back. How many what? You know what? He tilted his head, pretending to think. You mean, how many times did I fail to be understood? Arnett's patience snapped. Don't play riddles. How many women did you kill? Mark's expression didn't change. He looked down at his hands, at the faint scars on his knuckles, years of carpentry, decades of pretense. You know, he said softly, I never thought of it as killing. Killing sounds loud. Messy. This was quieter. Arnett's stomach turned. You stalked them. You recorded them. You buried them. He looked up. Buried, he repeated, tasting the word. No. I kept them. People don't bury what they love. She felt the air thin between them. You didn't love them. Mark smiled. That's what makes you uncomfortable, detective. The idea that love can look like control. Arnett leaned forward. Love doesn't end in dirt. He shrugged. Everything ends in dirt. Silence filled the room. The recorder on the table clicked softly, counting seconds. Finally, Arnett said, You moved after each disappearance. Why? Why does anyone move? He said. The neighbors get curious. People start talking. I like quiet places. Oregon, California, Nevada, she listed. You left every time a woman went missing. He smiled, faint and chilling. Maybe I'm bad luck. Arnett exhaled slowly. You planned everything. You picked houses, routines, women who lived alone. You built trust, waited until they were comfortable then. Mark interrupted gently. You're describing most friendships. The sound of her fist hitting the table broke the calm. You murdered them. His gaze stayed level. And yet you're still here asking questions. That's the funny thing about people like you. You want closure, but you never stop opening doors. Arnett stood. I'll find them all, she said. Everyone you thought you erased. He looked up, and for the first time, something flickered in his eyes, amusement, maybe even admiration. Good, he said. Then you'll see the pattern. What pattern? He didn't answer. He just smiled again, a thin curve that felt colder than a scream. The prison door closed behind her with a clang that echoed through her ribs. Outside, the sun felt too bright. Her hands shook as she lit a cigarette she didn't remember pulling out. Mark's words rattled in her head, You'll see the pattern. That night, she pinned the map again. Red string connecting the places, Oregon, Nevada, California. Each move roughly 6 years apart. Each time, a woman disappeared near him. She traced the pattern backward, further than the files reached. The earliest record of him she could find was in 1984, working as a maintenance technician at a small apartment complex near Reno. 2 months before he quit, a tenant named Rachel Flores vanished walking home from a night shift. The file was slim, barely investigated at the time, no forced entry, assumed runaway. Arnett called the Reno Police Archives. They still had evidence. Old, fragile, but kept. A blood-stained earring, collected from the alley where Rachel's purse was found. No DNA analysis ever done. She requested it. The technician on the other end hesitated. You think it's connected? I don't think, Arnett said. I know the rhythm. While the request processed, she visited Aaron Caldwell's parents again. She didn't have to, but something about the case felt like it demanded witnesses, not just to the crimes, but to the truth of what followed. Margaret Caldwell opened the door. She looked older, smaller, but her eyes still burned with the same steady light. You found another, didn't you? She asked, before Arnett could speak. Arnett nodded. Oregon. And maybe Nevada. Margaret's hand tightened on the doorframe. He was doing this long before Aaron. Yes. The mother's voice trembled, not from fear but rage. He smiled at us, she said. He fixed our mailbox once. My husband said he was the only decent neighbor left on that street. Arnett said softly. That's why it worked. Margaret looked out at the horizon. Will they dig up all the places he's lived? We will, Arnett said. Margaret's voice lowered to a whisper. Then don't stop until you run out of Earth. Days blurred. Reports, phone calls, boxes of microfilm, storage inventories. The Reno evidence arrived first. The lab prepped the earring. It was small, cheap, the kind of jewelry someone might wear every day. They swabbed it, extracted degraded DNA, compared it against the database. When the results came back, the lab tech called her personally. "It's not conclusive," he said. "But there's a partial male profile. And it's consistent with the Danner line." Arnett didn't speak. She just closed her eyes. The pattern was real. 3 states. 3 women. 3 homes with no forced entry. He'd hunted under the guise of helpfulness. The friendly man with the toolbox. The neighbor you trust with a spare key. When the task force met that evening, the evidence board was full. Photographs. Maps. Strings connecting decades. Someone muttered, "He's a ghost that waves." Arnett stared at the board. "No," she said quietly. "He's a habit." The room fell silent. Because that was it, the core of who he was. Mark Danner didn't kill because of rage or revenge. He killed because he could. Because the world let him blend in, year after year, town after town, as long as he said please and thank you. When the meeting ended, Arnett stayed behind. Alone, she looked at Aaron's photo, smiling, unaware, frozen in time. "You started this," she whispered. "You brought them all back." Somewhere, in a prison cell miles away, Mark Danner sat on his cot staring at the concrete wall. He wasn't smiling this time. His fingers tapped the rhythm of something, soft, repetitive, deliberate. A guard passing by paused, listening. "What are you doing, Danner?" he asked.